All right, right now we are going to talk about dividing by a whole number. And the question that we're asking is, how can you write a decimal quotient when dividing whole numbers? So let's break this apart here, our question. A decimal quotient. So that means my quotient is going to have a decimal in it. So I've got to figure out, instead of having a remainder now, how do I create a decimal in that quotient? So the first problem that we're going to be working on together is I put up on the board 180 divided by 8. And there's some key terms in here that you need to understand. First, that first number is our dividend. It's pretty, we've got to remember that that's the dividend, and the number that is dividing into the dividend is the divisor. So I've color-coded them here so that you can see it. And when you're writing this out, as I've done over here, the way that I like to remember it is dividend. That means the dividend goes inside when we write it, and the divisor is on the outside. So I say dividend, so like dividend, so it's inside, and then the divisor out. So this O here represents out. And that's how we know that we're making sure that we set the problem up correctly. So make sure that you can locate the dividend and the divisor. Next, let's go through solving this problem. So step 1, I'm just going to check in real quick to kind of estimate 180 divided by 10. So I'm rounding this 8 up to 10. And I do a quick check just to see where I think that this quotient is going to be. My quick check is that 180 divided by 10, well, that gives me 18. So I know that I'm not going to divide in the ones place. I'm going to start in the tens place. So that's just a quick check before you start. Step 2, we're actually going to start solving the problem. So like I just said, we're not dividing into the ones place, because 1 does not divide by 8. So I'm just using an X there, and I'm actually going to erase because that's a little bit sloppy. To hold my place, I'm placing my X there. It's holding my place. I'm going to start dividing into the tens place. All right. So I've got my long division steps over here written on the side. Just remember those. Divide, multiply, subtract, and bring down. And I can check these off as I do it. 18 divided by 8, that's 2. 2 times 8 gives me 16, so I'm on to multiply. I'm on to subtract. I'm checking it off here. And that gives me 2. And I've got to bring the 0 down. All right, so next I'm going back all over, again, my steps. Now I've got 20. 20 divided by 8 is 2. 2 times 8, again, I've done my division, I've done my multiplication. That's 16. Subtract, mark it off again, and I get 4. The sum is 4. So we've done the process of adding a remainder here, but I'm saying we're not going to add a remainder. What we get to do now is called annex a 0. And when I annex a 0, I'm going to write this up top. That means no remainder. I place a decimal point up top in my quotient, and it allows me to add a 0. Sorry, I'm going to do this in red. It allows me to add a 0, which I then bring down. And now I just go over the steps of long division again. Divide. 40 divided by 8. That is 5. Now I multiply, so I've done divide. Now I multiply. 5 times 8 gives me 40. Multiply. Subtract. And it's 0. So I now have answered my question from the beginning. Let's go back. How can you write a decimal when dividing whole numbers? You annex a 0 by adding a decimal in the quotient. So you might want to add that to your notes because we've answered our question. We've now figured out how we do that. Okay, so review step 2. Step 3, we've solved it. I solved it on that next one, so we really didn't need this. This would just be solving it. I'm going to just put annex 0. That's right there. And add a decimal. All right, let's move on. So I want to talk a little bit also about bar notation. So this is going to be in that vocabulary as well. Bar notation is what we use when we have a repeating decimal. So we've already learned how we're going to annex a 0, we're going to bring down, but in this one we're going to get a bar notation and we need to understand what that is and how we write it. So we've got 456 divided by 9, and remember I'm setting this up. My first number here, what is that? That's the dividend. So that's going to go inside, and then my next number here is my divisor. And that helps when I write it out, so I know that this one's going to go on the outside. All right, so I've got it set up here, and let's start by solving. Again, I can write my steps on the side if I want to. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. So if I just want to check off as I'm going through, that's a very helpful tool. Okay, 4 divided by 9 doesn't work. I'm going to use that x as a placeholder. X. Now I'm moving over to the tens place. I'm looking at 45 now. 45 divided by 9. 9 times what equals 45? And that's 5. 9 times 5 is 45. So I've done my divide, I've done my multiply. I'm going to subtract. I get 0, and I'm bringing down the 6. Now I'm going to repeat again. 6 divided by 9, well, doesn't go in at all, so it's 0. Remember that. If it doesn't go in, it's 0. 0 times 9 is 0. So I've done my divide, I've done my multiply, I've done my subtract. Get 6. And I get to that point where I don't want to write a remainder. I want to annex a 0, so I add my decimal. I add a 0, and I bring it down. Add a 0. Okay, now I go back. I've already done all these steps, so I'm going to go back and start the process over. 60 divided by 9 equals 6. Divide. 9 times 6 is 56. That's my multiplication. Subtract, and I'm going to get 4. And again, I can't write a remainder, so I'm going to annex another 0. And I'm going to bring it down. And I'm going to start the process over. 40 divided by 9 equals 3. Nope, 4. 9 times 4, again, I'm marking off. 9 times 4 is 36. I'm running out of space. You've got to give yourself lots of space. And I'm going to get 40 is 4. All right, I'm going to add a 0. And I'm going to bring down. I've got 40. And what you're going to see is this pattern continues, and I want you to continue it. When you see a continuing pattern in division, you use bar notation. You write it over that number, and that means that this pattern is going to continue. We'll continue practicing on that in class, but I want you to start understanding bar notation and how you use it. So you continue this problem even though I've run out of space. And we'll check in with that tomorrow. Now let's do a few more problems together. One more together, and then you guys are going to do some on your own. I'm putting everything into practice. So I've got 124 divided by 10. I can do a quick check here and kind of estimate what I think my answer is going to be. And then let's go ahead and start solving. Can't go into the ones place, so I'm going to hold it. Going into the tens place. So 12 divided by 10, 1. 1 times 10 is 10. Subtract. Bring down my 2. Add. Bring the 4 down. Okay, 24 divided by 10, 2. Very good. 2 times 10 is 20. Subtract. You get 4. Again, I'm stuck, so I've got to annex that 0, place that decimal, add a 0, bring it down. I've got 40. 10 divided by 40. 40 divided by 10, I'm sorry, is 4. So you've got your answer. Let's just check. 0, 40 times, subtract, and you get 0. So there's your quotient. With a decimal. So you have to remember, annex that 0 by adding a decimal. All right, practice on your own. On your own, you're going to try 89 divided by 5 for number 2, and number 3, you're going to do 514 divided by 4. Great work.